And that was a great introduction to this talk. The title of which is Prejudices and Sins, and yet you came. I mean, that's awesome. You know, I could say God is all there is, love is all there is, amen, have a good day, but there's a lot to this, and I'm very excited about it. But the first thing I want to do is get sin out of the way, because we know sin is just making a mistake. It's called missing the mark. There's no punishment, only consequences. Law of cause and effect. So we can correct our mistakes and we can forgive ourselves and move on from there. So if you'd like to know more about sin, that's about all I'm going to say. And you can talk to our practitioners afterwards. They're available. I want to tackle prejudice. You know, that word gets thrown around a lot, so I want to clarify it a little bit. One definition of prejudice is preconceived judgment or opinion about someone formed without justification or before we have sufficient knowledge. Sounds good to me. But there's another nuance to this that is important. When I checked it on Wikipedia, it said, a feeling towards a person based solely on their group membership. Their group membership. So feelings towards others based on their group. Now, a group can be race, but it can also be sex, gender, beliefs, values, our social class, our age, our disabilities, our religion, our sexuality, our language. It can be our beauty, our nationality. It can be our occupation, our education. There are all these realms of groups that we can be prejudiced against. It could be criminality. It could be sports. What sports team do you like? I remember David and I going round and round on that one. And other personal characteristics. So it's when we have a preconceived judgment about anyone or any group or anything, it's prejudice. Now in the 1800s and the 1900s, we know that as a country we had wars about prejudice, and that was with the Indian nations and then the Civil War. Pretty ugly things when it's totally about race and division within the country. But it wasn't until the 1950s that prejudice was linked to categories. And there was a lot of research on this, and they said once we form a category in our mind, it becomes the basis for how we look at everything. Infamous blonde jokes come to mind. Do you get that? Researchers felt that this can't be avoided since we're simply too inundated with information to sort it all out in a logical way. And so we depend on our ability to place people in categories to make it simpler, to make things easier to understand. An article I read recently said our initial assessment takes 35 hundredths of a second. I mean, that is fast. By placing everything, everyone, everything, category, category, category. This also allows us to react quickly when we see a category that is unfamiliar or that we are, I wouldn't say afraid of, but that we don't like. But it leads to a lot of mistakes, and that's the thing to recognize. When I first came to the center in the late, I was doing this several times this morning. I said in the late 1800s. Well, that would be a long time ago. It was in the late 1980s. I was introduced to the writings of Ram Dass. Hopefully you know who this wonderful man is. He wrote this fabulous book called Grist for the Mill. And he suggests that as adults, we look at life through different perceptions of reality. And we can call it prejudice. If we say, prejudice is a preconceived judgment or opinion formed without justification or before we have sufficient knowledge. And he gives several examples. I love these examples. We're invited to a party, and we walk in the room. And if we're just generally interested in who's there, we see men, women, tall people, short people, fat people, thin people. Some blonde, some brunette, some fat, some thin, and some people we instantly know we want to get to know them better. And then there's other people we just know we don't need to get to know them. Prejudice It's categories, isn't it? But if our interest is in social justice, we walk into that room and we see people by their race, by their ethnic origin. If we're interested in fashion, we see what everybody's wearing. And boy, that list gets long on Judgment, doesn't it? And Prejudice, a laundry list of things about what people are wearing, their style, the labels on their clothes. And if we're interested in health and fitness, we start looking at everybody's body instantly and judging who takes care of the body and who we think doesn't. But if we're sexually inclined, this is the fun part of this from Ram Dass. If we're sexually inclined, we walk into the room and we immediately divide people into 3 categories. Those who are potentially makeable, those who are competitors for us, for people who are potentially makeable, and everybody else is irrelevant. Now, I thought that was really cute until during my single days after my divorce, and I went to this singles party at the Holiday Inn, and it was happening right in front of my eyes. Potentially makeable, a competitor, or irrelevant. Very interesting. But in the 70s, research started showing that prejudice is based more on favoritism for our own group. Call it the in-group. Let's call ourselves the in-group. And then we have a neutral or negative feeling about the out-groups, the other groups. Some researchers say that prejudice may develop not because we don't like the out-groups, but we reserve all the good feelings for our in-group. I can understand that. But a more contemporary theory is we believe that out-groups, let's say in Reading fundamentalist groups, are more homogeneous than our group, more cohesive. We paint every individual in that out-group with a broad brush, that they're all alike, failing to see that each person in that group is unique. In our hearts, we know that's not true. But it's a moment to become aware of our underlying prejudice that we might not even know is there. Because here we teach we are all unique creations of the one. So why prejudice occurs is one thing, but what can we do about it? Well, researchers are finding ways. They're finding different ways that it can be reduced, and one is showing considerable success, training people to become more empathetic to those out-groups. Walking a mile in their shoes in your mind. And empathy for the homeless comes to mind on that one. By imagining ourselves in the same situation, we consider what we would or wouldn't do, how we would or would not act. And then if we can be there walking in their shoes in our mind, we have a better understanding of how they are the way they are. Other techniques researchers have found is, of course, passing a law and regulation that require fair treatment for people of all groups. Making people aware of their own inconsistencies, which is something I hope this talk does this morning. And increasing our contact with members of those other groups. That can be scary. And that brings me to why the video card is here this morning. And Damien and Cherie are going to help me there. How many have seen the video, 40 Strangers, 50 Questions? Yay, only one. Oh, good. And she came anyway. She knew I was going to do this. Bless you, Sharon. It's only 7 minutes long. So if you could turn the lights out and if you could turn the spotlights out, please. So hang in there with me for 7 minutes on this video. And here's the background. It was created by a new film company called Brave New Films. I like that title, Brave New Films. They're in Southern California. And earlier this year, a friend of the company's staff dared them to create a film that was positive, that would be positive information for these disturbing times. The staff took up the challenge, and in the end, they didn't expect to be so deeply moved by the film that they created. So here's what they did. They placed an ad on Craigslist inviting people to meet in a warehouse in Culver City. They were promised lunch and an interesting experience. Would you have answered that ad? That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? So on Wednesday, May 24th, just 2 months ago, 40 strangers entered this warehouse, and they saw strips of masking tape on the floor laid out in large squares. The film team physically separated the people into squares based on their race. The moderator said, "I'll be asking you questions, and after each question, if in your mind you answer yes to that question, I would like you to move to the other wall in the warehouse and pose for a photo with your new group. And if you answered no, just stay where you are." That was it. No judgment, no dialogue. So let's watch this beautiful video. It's an experiment in coming together, splitting apart, joining and rejoining. And you might want to have Kleenex nearby. We put out little packets this morning because I've watched it 4 times and I cry every time. So, Damien?
Going through an exercise like this can help break down stereotypes.
To see the cultures around us and the honesty that was in the room.
We don't actually ask people what they think, and we don't ask people some of the questions that the exercise challenged us with.
Thank you for coming. We have placed you all in boxes based on your race, which you may or may not like. You will be asked a question. If the answer for you is yes, you will step forward over to this wall and pause for a photo with that newly formed group.
How did I feel when I was placed in the box?
A little weird because the other people were, I didn't know them. They were all strangers.
And that was kind of uncomfortable and, brought up many mixed feelings.
Some people are probably upset because they feel this box is defining them.
The questions will range from playful to personal. We welcome your reactions to the experience. Did you have overprotective parents?
Large group of people from different backgrounds facing a level of vulnerability and honesty, making a statement about what they truly feel like on the inside.
Are you in love right now? And I mean right now.
I was really happy to see how many people were in love right now.
Do you have a tattoo?
A couple of the questions kind of really dug right in there.
Were you ever teased because of your race or the way you look?
It gave me an immediate shift in perspective to always remember that there's other people going through things no matter what you're going through.
Have you ever had to skip a meal because you couldn't afford it?
I was surprised to how many people had not eaten because they couldn't afford to.
Do you distrust police officers?
The amount of people, I realize that don't trust in the cops. I don't think I ever really opened my eyes to that before.
Did anything surprise me?
When the question was asked, have you ever saved a life, or has your life ever been saved?
A lot of people saved some lives, and a lot of people got their life saved.
That was pretty epic.
And to see that, and immediately thought of, wow, that must have been a really big deal, what they had to go through.
Are you on a medication that you need to survive?
I didn't necessarily have to step over the line and out the box on that, but my loved ones are facing that every day, and that was A little sensitive one right there.
Have you had sex this past week?
Well, my mom was in the room, so the whole sex in the past week one, I was like, no. But yeah, other than that, I was good with all the questions.
Congratulations!
Some of the questions that I felt like the energy got a little bit more serious.
Do you feel lonely?
I know what it's like if you're lonely and you don't want to ever be excluded.
Have you lost a loved one to cancer?
I felt a sense of wanting to comfort the people who stepped up for those, and at the same time feeling grateful that I haven't had to deal with that particular challenge in my life.
I was standing up in a group. It was interesting to look out and see the other people that hadn't. So it was a practice in observation and an understanding of how we all really connect in different ways on different topics across the board.
Was there a question that resonated with me most? I love the dancing question.
I feel like love actually is the root of all happiness.
We have to be aware of our biases and be brave enough to put those aside.
We all look different and have different identities, but we're all beautiful and we're all strong.
I believe that everybody born is good.
Do you feel we are stronger united than divided?
Even though we all come from different backgrounds, different races, different parts of the country, we're all the same somehow.
Despite whatever you might see in mainstream media, there's overwhelming evidence that humanity is uniting, and I think the future does look bright.
Honestly, I felt like this is true America.
100% of us on that wall together.
Beautiful woman next to me, I think she was Native American, and I just put my arm around her and she put her head on my shoulder, and it was beautiful, and I'm really glad that I got to be a part of it.
I wish we would do an exercise like this as a nation. Somehow, if we could get the 300 million people in one room.
We have so much in common. Our struggles are so intertwined, and recognizing our differences to find commonalities.
Barriers were broken down quicker than what I thought they would be.
One of them said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Leon." And he said, "I'm never going to forget you."
I learned it's more important now than ever to live from a place of compassion.
That was great. Part of the commentary that I read later about this film is that the film team didn't come to any epiphany that love conquers all, or that we should understand racist views or people who oppress neighbors. But they didn't want to hug everyone that left that day either, which I found interesting. But they did feel that somehow this film caught the essence of hope. The essence of hope. They saw empathy not as an end, but rather a beginning and a place to move forward from, a place that will make us all better people. So how do we as a group, as a category, overcome our own stereotypes? I think the first thing to do is acknowledge that we have them. I remember 10 years, or maybe it was 15 years ago, when tattoos regained their popularity. When I was growing up, only people that were in World War II or were in gangs had tattoos. And so my immediate impression was somebody had a tattoo. Oh dear, I need to look out for them. But you know, on this film, when they said, "Do you have a tattoo?" there was kind of a kinship there, wasn't it? There was a category of people there, and they were laughing and smiling. And the issue for me, it's not really an issue anymore, because now some of my best friends have tattoos. And so that one's really gone for me. Twyla raised her hand. Bless you, sweetheart. How can you argue with that, you know? But I do feel empathy for people who have extreme tattoos. Like Paul was in a doctor's office not long ago, and the nurse had masking tape on her, tape on her hands, on her arms. And he said, "Oh, were you injured?" And she said, "No, those are tattoos, and my doctor said I have to cover them up to work here." And this week in the news, I don't know if you saw it, there was a film or pictures of a man who had this huge tattoo on his face, and he couldn't find a job. You know, sometimes in a new group that's not really very familiar, you want to push the envelope, but society doesn't move that fast, societal norms. I'm glad I love people with tattoos now. I still wouldn't have one myself, but that's okay. So the more we become aware of our stereotypes, the easier it is to change that thought and replace it with a positive affirmation. Like, I love Twyla. She is a beautiful, beautiful woman, and she expresses herself that way, and I can respect that. Years ago, I used to have a stereotype of motorcyclists. They were all in gangs. And you know, what I came to find out in the last 10 or 15 years, that a lot of these people are business owners, doctors, dentists, and they love dressing up with all these leathers and cruising around and looking bad. And so now that stereotype's gone. And I'm glad about that. I don't have the courage to do it myself, but that's okay. So having the courage to move out of our comfort zone and expose ourselves to different groups helps lessen our stereotypes. You know, if we went to a different church that had a different racial makeup or a different faith, or we went to a club in town that had a different recreational category or a hobby. If we go to public events in places like San Francisco and Sacramento, the diversity is just amazing. And so it can broaden our worldviews. Because to love one another at God's level, at the level we strive for here in this center, is to get past those prejudices, to get past our biases. And we can do it all without giving up our comfort zone. We don't have to be them, but we can love and honor them. But there are some things like ISIS and terrorism that I do understand. I've researched enough, I understand where they're coming from, but I do not want to allow that in my life or have that energy in my life. That's just a decision. It's not a stereotype, it's a decision. So as we clarify who, what, where, why, our stereotypes start to fade, and we become better equipped to be the light in the darkness, to be the light to help move society forward. And it's not to fix society, it's just to help them move forward, and so more people are valued, appreciated, and embraced. So I wrote a treatment on this because I thought I might be too emotional to just pull one out of the ether. So join me in this. God, the creator of all, and we as individual, I can't even do that, okay. We as individual parts of that divine creation honor divine unity that personifies itself in the multiplicity of all people. Today, I see more clearly how divine unity operates through everyone and animates every one of our experiences. It's the recognition of being one that we can consciously decide to grow together as strong, positive, confident, and whole beings. The reality that embraces us this morning is the same reality for all people that I shall ever meet. And therefore, in our human greeting today is a divine offering of namaste. Today, I accept for myself and everyone here an improved ability to meet every situation, every person, with the consciousness of perfect oneness, and with complete respect for our differences on the outside and our oneness on the inside. So in gratitude for my faith and the goodness of God, I know my union with all life is perfect. I give thanks, and so it is.